Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max.
Welcome, everyone. We are the Geek Patrol, and our microphones don't have a stun setting. Today, we're joining you from Allan Gilbreth's private herpetarium, where he just finished breeding his annual brood of pumpkin-spiced rattlesnakes. I know there's a logic behind that, and I don't know that I want to know, but you stuck with tradition every year.
Absolutely.
You know, people count on this, so I guess the flavoring, something?
Oh, absolutely. A little ranch dressing. You'd be surprised how tasty a rattlesnake is.
Everything else is pumpkin spiced. I didn't know, whatever. So, anyway, welcome to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Allan Gilbreth and our pal Max over there behind the glass. Brandon is not here. He's on assignment. He's over at the Memphis Comic Expo for day 2 of the activity, and I'm sure he'll have a field report when he comes back next week. But in because of that, we're not going to go. We're going to leave the latest episode of Ahsoka off the table for today because I'm sure Brandon's going to want to discuss it. It was quote unquote a noteworthy episode, and if you can't see my eyes rolling, folks, then I don't know, Allan. We're gonna. We're
I don't know. Are you getting tired of space whales? Come on, man.
Well, here's what I will say. Later in the show, we're gonna have kind of, I hope, an interesting discussion. Sometimes it's fun to to examine the juxtaposition. How's that for a word? Of different genres. And today later in the show, we're gonna juxtapose the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the Sherlock Holmes novels and short stories. Really, they're all short stories. So we're going to compare those two universes, the Sherlock Holmes written universe versus the MCU, and draw some conclusions and analyze. Because let's just put it out there, Allan, and I think all of us are in agreement. Let me put it this way. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll listen to our very oldest episodes of Geek Tank Radio back in 2015. It is amazing how much our world of geekdom has changed over that time. I remember listening to episodes where we could not wait for the new Star Wars Force Awakens movie that was coming out. We were talking about the Daredevil show that had just come on the air, and the world was our oyster back then. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was unfolding. And now, man, I am just burned out on all of it. What do you say, Allan? We can't miss you if you won't go away.
That's right.
We need something new. I mean, I'm not saying I want superhero movies to go away or Star Wars, but man, it's just way too much content, and quality suffers. And I mean, we need to look towards what's coming next.
Well, and that is what happens when you live in the land of plenty.
Yeah,
and technology, we get to set the Wayback Machine, and let's go back to the original Star Wars. And I also want to throw in the original Jurassic Park.
That's fair because that was very novel.
They're
when it came
closely
out.
related. They're closely related in a lot of ways, in the simple fact that you had directors with grandiose visions and really no way of getting them done. Really, honestly.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, really, honestly, if you look at, picture being in the room in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you really got to get a grip on this. This is the 70s. A special effect is when the guy presses the plunger and something actually explodes.
That's true, yeah.
So Here,
there wasn't the CGI. It was
sci-fi was the realm of B movies because it was easy to make you fly through space, aka 1967 Star Trek.
Yeah,
you had a model and you flew it in front of a black background with pinholes in it and a light on.
Right.
Look, there's
We're
stars.
In space. Yeah.
And this was a $5 effect. Plan 9 from Outer Space was honestly pie plates stapled together on a string.
Right.
So here comes Star Wars. And Star Wars is half a samurai movie and half a Western.
Yeah, it's a space western. I mean, that's true.
It's got all of the makings of a good Japanese samurai movie, and it has all of the makings of a fairly standard western, including the stereotypical characters.
Well, in theme it does, but let's face it, we were there for the 70s. Max, you didn't get to enjoy this, but Star Wars was new. This was new. And I mean, I remember it was in the theaters for a year, and it was exciting. And it was.
And what was new about it was that it had truly amazing, iconic, thinly put together characters with no explanation. No explanation. You have no explanation. You know what? The simple fact is Star Wars merely bought into every weird character with no backstory, no explanation, nothing. They didn't tell you what a Wookiee was.
Well,
there was just this giant walking carpet. They didn't explain what a Darth Vader was, but you didn't have any problem understanding that was the bad guy.
Yeah, when he walked in, it's not even a question.
There was no question what was going on.
The thing is, though, we got something new. We got something exciting, and then we had to wait 3 years to get the next one.
We did.
There was anticipation. There was excitement. And then when the second one came along, which a lot of people argue that that's the best Star Wars, I'm still partial to Return of the Jedi. However, it really got you eager for what was coming next. So.
There are a few things these days that I feel kind of capture that level of anticipation because I guess it's a little bit of a different genre. Well, let's just take, for example, the new Dune movie. Like, I feel there's a certain level of anticipation. It's like, ooh, I can't wait for Dune Part 2 to come out because, like, they already stunned you with, like, wonderful visual effects, good storytelling, and great music. And so it's like, maybe we just need to steer our direction in making anticipatory films or media in things other than superheroes.
You can't just give it if it's there's just too much, man. There's just we need something new, and that's what I'm hoping. I mean, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we need a new genre. How about we just take a break from that and just go back to making some good old, movies? So we're gonna continue that discussion when we come back here on Geek Tank Radio.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. Put the disintegrator down and step away from the radio. The Geek Patrol is back.
Or if it's therapeutic, fire. I mean, whatever works for you.
It's been known to work.
Yeah. So, and welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Allan Gilbreth and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. Brandon is out on assignment. He'll be back next week. So.
I think the superhero genre needs a disintegrator.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to sound like haters, so...
I'm not being hateful. I just like the idea of using the disintegrator.
Yeah. So, hey, I was thinking of something off the break. I'm going to throw this at you guys. And, Max, I think you would even fall into this because you didn't get to watch it happen live. However, you've seen these movies. So, Allan, back in the day, my love for the 1980s and everything like that. Okay, as I recall, and I'm thinking in terms of before, I feel like before the 1989 Batman came along, I kind of look at those as that. I look at that as a linchpin movie in terms of changing things. I know we had Superman before that and everything, but superhero movies were really not much of a thing. Even the Superman movie, that was sort of a one-off type thing. Here's my experience with 1980s movies. There was no one set. There were every kind of genre, as I recall. There was a sprinkling of them. We had our sprinkling of sci-fi movie. We had variety, and I'm thinking the studios, they didn't just put all their eggs in one basket, as and really, I think Disney, it's all Star Wars and Marvel. That's all I think about when I think of Disney. I know they have Pixar, they have other things, but really, I don't know, man. And of course, Warner Brothers, I just think of DC or something. So can we just get a little more variety, I think? Is that, I feel like financially and stuff, it would make more sense for them to do too. So, well,
as our dear friend, Mr. Craig Brewer pointed out last week, the world changed.
Well, technology, that's true. Technology is the issue now, right?
Utterly changed.
Yeah.
And If we go back to the 70s and 80s, we were just now discovering cable television.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to put everything in perspective. When Star Wars came out, there was broadcast TV.
Yeah.
3-4 channels, and you had UHF with whatever your area supported then.
Yeah, we didn't
that
even
was
have
it.
Blockbuster
That
video
was
or
it,
anything.
folks.
Yeah.
Now we are blessed in Memphis, Tennessee, where we record this show. Is that we had a very funny guy named Savad,
Okay.
and he kind of started the late night monster movie fad.
Yeah.
And, his poor, in a terrible costume in the 60s, walked out, blah, blah. Ooh, that was very scary. And,
Right.
we've made fun of him for the last 50 years. But he gave rise to, Elvira wouldn't have existed without Savad. So
The son of Svengoolie. I don't know who came first, but
the whole Svengoolie thing, all of that.
Yeah.
Of even our dear buddy of Mr. Dalsmalchin.
Oh, yeah.
Has his Count character that he likes to play on the side.
Count Crawley. Yeah.
And these are all cheesy, makeup-oriented, low-tech, cheap, on-the-fly, easy-to-do stuff that relies on skill and ability or just plain camp. But now we've got so many streaming services. We've got where before you went to Hollywood to be discovered. Today, Hollywood is wherever you got a camera.
That's true. Yeah.
And some special effects. I've got the ability on my home computer now to actually create a 2-hour movie in about 6 hours.
Yeah.
This is a crazy technology, but it doesn't change the fact that if you go watch an old Vincent Price film, knowing that there is not a single special effect in that whole movie,
Yeah.
Vincent will still get you.
Yeah.
You go watch a Laurence Olivier, or I'll bring up a Sherlock Holmes, whichever Sherlock Holmes you want to watch, any one of them. And there's a bunch over the years.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to give you a stunning performance. Or Hercule Poirot, or any number of the old detective series.
It makes me kind of think that they need to kind of focus less on the tech of the day at the expense of the performance, because back in the day it was low tech, high performance. Nowadays it might be low performance, high tech. So someday I'd like to see the marriage of the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I don't know. There's this part of me I still cannot get my head around the fact that we have studios like Disney and Marvel, and I mean I'm leaning on them heavily. It seems impossible to me that with the resources they have that they could produce shows and movies that are not good. Here's the reason I'm thinking. Okay, surely there's a process. You have to submit the script. You have to run the ideas around everybody. How do they green light so many mediocre products? I mean, it makes no sense to me that you could spend $200 million on a film that is just not good. I'll never understand that. Yeah, it seems like you would flesh that stuff out before you spend that money.
That's funny that you say that, because I remember you were telling me the other day that it's like, how can a simple anime episode have better quality than a whole Disney franchise?
There's Max and I, we were watching the Violet Evergarden, Attack on Titan, the Vinland Saga. I mean, the list goes on. And they're usually not that huge a production, and they grip. They're the best content I've had in years. I mean,
I will freely tell anybody if they want to watch some of the finest in Asia's cinema or finest in cinema, period.
Right.
Go sit down and watch Spirited Away.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
You have at least 3 different movies all on the same DVD.
Right.
Because there's the beginning, there's the middle, and there's the end. And each of them is their own story, told in their own way, in their own pace. And they are definitely completely separate segments.
Yeah.
And yet, at the end of it, you have had an amazing cinematic ride. And it's a cartoon, y'all. It's an anime.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm a hater today, but it's just kind of
No. I'm gonna throw a little more at you when we come back.
okay. Because we do want to and we're gonna also do kind of a fun side by side comparison, comparing the Marvel Cinematic Universe to the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. You're listening to Geek Tank Radio. We're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. I'd like to see you try getting on an escalator wearing a Godzilla costume. The Geek Patrol is back.
Yeah, and when that tail gets stuck, oh boy, mayhem will ensue. And we'll painful memories, Max. And we'll come back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Allan Gilbreth and our buddy Max over there behind the glass.
I got a shocker. Back when I was going to Dragon Con, I made the stupid mistake of dressing up in a ghillie suit. Now imagine the torture of being on an escalator with that. You get caught in that. Ugh.
Yeah, it's hot too. You couldn't have picked a hotter suit to wear, right? So,
no.
Okay. Yeah, Max, you got to suffer for your art, and even sometimes that means
tangled
injury.
for your art.
Exactly.
I have no problem letting Max suffer for his art. I'm good.
And Brandon's not here. He's out on assignment. He'll be back next week. Okay, I had an insight off the air, as often happens. So we earlier in the show we mentioned that we were going to do kind of this interesting side by side comparison of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. Well, I'm going to throw a little variable into that, if you don't mind. So, I had an insight off the air, you guys. So I was talking to Allan in our show prep yesterday about my experience, not just with Sherlock Holmes mysteries, but with a lot of books that I really like, even including Harry Potter, or just I've got a lot of or P.G. Woodhouse. That guy's writing is great. And I was asking myself, why is it that, and I'm a big fan of the audiobooks because I can listen to them while I'm working. Well, how is it that I could listen to these books over and over, really without getting tired of them, and really where I learned something? Maybe I don't learn, but I get a new insight every time I listen. And why are they so enjoyable? And I can't do that necessarily with a superhero movie or whatever. And I just had kind of an insight. Well, for one thing, I really enjoy great dialogue. Dialogue is, one of the things we talked about with Sherlock Holmes is the great writing, and the way Sherlock Holmes and Watson speak is fascinating. But I just had a thought, Allan. I think part of the reason is because in the written word, you're actually participating in the story in terms of your imagination is filling in these gaps. You're actively creating the art in your mind, if that's is that a fair thing? In a film or a TV show, you're basically absorbing what's put before you, but here it's you're actively engaged with the story. Maybe that's why the written word is why it holds up so well.
I've only dabbled a little bit in publishing and writing for the last 30 years. The act of reading or the act of writing, the relationship you have with the book is a personal media. It is an intimate experience because it is you and the material.
Yeah.
Of a lot of books, Sherlock Holmes, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, of Moby Dick, all of these things were written with the idea that they would be spoken.
Yeah.
And there's a big thing I throw in here because back in the day, let's go back to Shelley, let's go back to Byron, and the way you knew you had made it is if your book got performed on stage.
Ah, there you go.
So,
yeah.
To the point, now let's think about how good the actor had to be on stage with no special effects to get investigated as Jack the Ripper was the old boy starring at the time in Jekyll and Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the police showed up to ask the actor questions.
Right.
Because, he was doing such a great job of portraying both of these characters.
Yeah.
And then let's look at somebody like Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr., who gave us amazing monster movies with very little other than just makeup to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll pick on Shakespeare for a moment. absolutely written words designed to be spoken and delivered to an audience.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pick on Star Wars again for just a second, because Star Wars assumed you had suspended disbelief and were just going to go along for the ride. So we didn't have to know where Darth Vader's armor came from.
Yeah.
We didn't have to know if the Wookiee had a flea collar. We didn't have to know why, who, what, when. The only thing we needed an explanation on was, what was the samurai guy in the funny robes with the glowy sword?
Okay.
That was it. But if you go back and watch that movie, there are just massive gaping holes in it that nobody cared about. And if you go back to Sherlock Holmes and you look at the dialogue, since you brought up dialogue.
That's what I was interested in. Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes versus Moriarty. There is no action at all but spoken words. You have never seen a better sword fight than those two talking to each
Just
other.
listening to well-delivered dialogue is awesome.
That reminds me too of how like a lot of the great stuff that occurs in anime is occurs in people's heads. Like for example, like with Death Note, that's a literal mental chess match between Light Yagami and L the detective.
Right. And there's something really cool about just great the written word is exciting. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of Andor is the great dialogue and the restraint. And actually, Andor is a good example of that because I've rewatched that a few times, and every time I do, what's great about Andor is what they're not saying and what they're giving the audience a lot of credit for their own intelligence, and you're filling in stuff. So I think that's what it is. If you have a chance to participate in the story, to me that's what holds up more than just here's a bunch of content and sit here and absorb it.
Well, let's go back to Broadway and let's pick on the difference between Les Mis and Cats, because it's really what we're talking about here. Les Mis, a thoughtful, in-depth story of the human condition during this shocking time in human history.
Right.
On stage for years and years and years. Cats, a bunch of cats one night. However, still a compelling story, still an amazing setup, and for the people that get into it, they fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
They're part of the story. So even a silly little musical about cats runs, I think it's still running. You know, this has been on stage now for almost 30 years. Welcome to the audience being an active participant.
And one of the keys to that is you have to actually care about the characters. And we'll
Yes,
talk about
indeed.
that when we come back here on Geek Tank Radio.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. Your hippogriff just went number 2 in my front yard. The Geek Patrol is back.
This is where you want the vanishing spell. I mean, and Wingardium Leviosa will not help you in this. It ends badly.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure you can't. I'm pretty sure you can't Avada Kedavra an inanimate object.
No, it doesn't work. And I've tried it, Max. And welcome back to Geek
Then you
Tank
should
Radio.
be in prison.
Okay. And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Allan Gilbreth and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. Brandon is off on assignment, and he'll be reporting back next week. And I know we sort of teased this as, if you're just tuning in, we sort of set this up as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm going to say the current Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
Versus, for example, Sherlock Holmes mysteries, but really we've expanded it into well-written stories that have held up throughout the decades and even centuries. And why is it that those still hold up versus why we're getting burned out on a lot of what Marvel's sending our way these days? For one thing, I think it's just too much content. What we're kind of talking about might be along what we're sort of unpacking is maybe the thing is when you read a book or when you listen to an audiobook or if you're participating in the storytelling in some way by filling in, using your imagination to fill in, there's something a little more satisfying about it, and that probably explains why you can read a book over and over or listen to an audiobook over and over. But Al, you're also saying that well-done film and TV and even theater if it's done in a way where there is audience participation, I think that's the key. Like I said, Andor is a perfect example. Every time I watch it, I figure out something new, and it's a lot to do with well spoken and well delivered dialogue, good acting, and making me care about every character on the screen. I think that's the hook.
I'd say one thing that even if you you don't necessarily have to, you can invite an audience, not necessarily just through the act of them reading the book or like with Cats. You could also invite them by making stories that are relevant to the human condition, like a character that you can sympathize with to some extent. Like the best antagonists are the ones that you could sympathize with, because like there's a difference between storytelling like in Shakespeare where it's like where they literally invoke the audience's attention, and a show like an anime or whatever where it's like you have a compelling character that you could genuinely sympathize with because of their suffering.
Exactly. You know what? It's funny you say that. So I'm having all these insights as we're talking, Max. So okay, part of that is to achieve that you have to slow things down a little, and you have to let things unfold. You can't. What I think what I'm seeing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, perfect example, Ant-Man and the Wasp. We just saw it. It is 2 hours or whatever it is of nonstop stuff happening, but it doesn't even give you a chance to care about it. And it's just bells and whistles. And at the end of it, I couldn't care less. You slow the pace down, like we said, in some of these animes or whatever, then you get invested in these characters. So
all right, I'm going to argue with the slow the pace down. I'm going to say change the pace up. And what I mean by that is everything going on in your story should be advancing your story, not blatantly telling your story.
Okay, I'll give you that. That's a good point, because you talked about Darth Vader walking in. The first time we see Darth Vader, within 60 seconds, he's choking guys. His men are shooting people. He walks in, and he's got his hands on his hips like he couldn't care. So we're already learning about him. So, all right, yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, he made an entrance.
Right.
All right, I'm going to go back to Robin Hood with Earl Flynn. Probably the greatest entrance of any character ever.
Never saw it.
He comes. Okay. All right. One.
You got one from this millennium? Or so, okay.
No, because you're gonna love this. Because all the king's men and all the guys are all sitting around, and busting up through the door comes the guy in the green tights with a deer over his neck.
Yeah.
And commences to just whooping people. Okay. And you're just kind of like, all right, wow. Now, if you wanted to let everybody know who the central character was gonna be,
yeah,
and you can already tell he's not playing by anybody else's rules. Vader walked in, and you went, "Oh, this is the guy to beat." You knew right then. You didn't have to get anything explained to you. The minute you walked into Jurassic Park, and the little crazy British guy lands in the middle of their dig, you're just kind of like, all right, obviously, whoever this is doesn't care about the fossils anymore.
Okay, yeah.
But then explain who he was and tell you jack about him, other than I've got enough money to have a helicopter and land in the middle of your stuff, and I'm going to convince you to go with me.
Maybe that's the whole failure out here. They're just violating basic storytelling principles. That
go watch an early Vincent Price, Cast the Amontillado or something like that, where it is just guttural storytelling, just being handed out. Go check out The Raven, or check out something even sillier like Arsenic and Old Lace. That is a non-stop comedy of murders.
Right.
I'll also contend to you something else as well in terms of something that's equally compelling without even needing words. Listen to some of the classic like symphonies by like Beethoven and everything. He doesn't say a single word, like minus like Ode to Joy, but you could feel the suffering of a man who is tortured by deafness.
That's true. Yeah, and music definitely plays a role in film and television and everything. So I don't know. I feel like it's just lazy stuff and just.
Well, I think it's relying too much on tech.
Yeah, we don't.
Tech is fabulous, but tech will never replace a character. Even if you don't like them, you're interested in him. Because let's face it, Sherlock Holmes was not likable. He wasn't truly likable. He was abrasive, but he was fun.
I like him. I can relate to it. He's a little like Spock in his clinical, whatever sort of non-emotional type
He was
thing.
relatable, but he wasn't you.
Yeah.
But he gave you something to aspire to.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think of like in terms of like high tech, low performance. It's the idea of fools with tools are still fools, and so we need more. We need more non-fools to use the tools properly.
I'm hoping that this strike kind of plays out where maybe somehow at the end of it we get better storytelling. I don't know, but
We can hope. That's what they're looking for.
all right, whatever it is, we're out of time, you guys. It's time to scoot. So on behalf, until next week, we are the Geek Patrol, and I am Joe Thorderson.
I'm Maximilian.
And I'm Allan Gilbreth, reminding you that this has been an academic conversation, but just remember, Joe, it's all elementary.